So the amount of effort we put into grief therapy drastically outweighs the effort we put into our education of death and death acceptance. We live in a culture that actively works to ignore or erase aging and death, be it through medicine, cosmetics, the legal system, or storytelling. It's pervasive throughout our culture. But specifically in our American culture, the result is a kind of death negative space where people feel a lot of anxiety about our natural processes. I invited, please introduce yourself,
Future mortician Emily McAllister.
to discuss not just the processes of death and dying, but just how funerary practices exist in America at the moment, and why, when we or the people close to us inevitably pass, the natural harm is magnified by how ill prepared we are, not just ourselves as the people dying, but in relation as family members to people that pass on. In order to talk about death positivity, we invited Emily, a mortuary science student, to discuss, just processes thereof, or I don't know, how you feel our culture has kind of been slowly or rapidly building around sort of, I don't know, a very problem status as far as death goes, because I think things are not getting better in our culture. They're rapidly going to get worse as far as death goes.
I think so. I think the first thing that we do when someone dies is we just kind of whisk the person away and we don't allow any time for grieving. It's like, you can grieve in this specific space that we've made for you where everything is very sterile and, there's different lights to make the person look more friendly and natural. But honestly, like nothing about death culture right now is natural, and it's kind of only getting worse, except for in places where it's getting better, which is what I like to do, what I want to do, what I really am going into this field to do, where you just exacerbate the death acceptance of people and try to get people to talk about it and try to get people to understand that you don't have to be afraid of dead people or people dying or the funeral industry or anything, because it's the only thing that every single person in this world does. We all die. Everyone's going to die.
Well, so I guess rather than focusing on where we get it wrong, I don't know. What direction would you like to take the conversation in? Would you like to talk about where we get it wrong, or would you like to talk about what our opportunities are for getting it better?
I think where we get it wrong is that there's nothing to be afraid of. And I think within the last like 100, 150, 200 years, whatever, it's been so recent. Um, we just are so afraid of it that we let someone else take responsibility for it. Which, I mean, at one point is like my job, or going to be my job, and at the other point is like something that I don't really like about it.
So before, I guess recent history, maybe death practices were more in family than
Oh,
they were.
absolutely.
Okay, well
Yeah.
maybe discuss. What was the transition between, like, where did we start going wrong?
When embalming started happening and when funeral practices started becoming more of an industrialized thing, kind of in the 1800s, definitely in the 1900s, and definitely now. We're seeing kind of a resurgence in like home wakes and home funerals,
Mm.
which is really cool. I really like that. Um, but it's taking a really long time
Mm.
to kind of get people to be like, oh no, there's a dead person in my living room. But it's like, it's your mom, it's your grandma. It's like, they're not gonna hurt you, they're just dead. And one thing about being in this industry and being around dead people and being around death in general is that, my God, they look so different. And it's okay. You don't have to be afraid of it. They're just dead. It's just a person. It's like, it seems so simple to people in the industry, and then people out of it see it as something like really morbid or abnormal to be like, oh, it's a dead person, gross. That's like, how is that gross? How is that any different from being alive?
Yeah.
And it's just that lack of something that scares us. And I think that that has a lot to do with how we perceive death and how we perceive us dying. You know, I did a little bit of research and I saw Freud, who I really don't agree with about anything
Well,
that he's
most
kind of ever
psychologists would
said.
not.
Yeah,
No.
he's kind of terrible. But he said that we're not afraid of death because we don't believe in our own death. And we can't be afraid of death necessarily because we've never experienced it. So we're afraid of the unknown. So when you're
It's a really good way to describe it, as
Well,
far as the anxiety that,
right.
comes in with, especially how a lot of, I guess, healthy people interact with the illness, physical illness within their family or
Right.
themselves, because it's can come for, to a great shock. And I think, as far as, and I know you research this as well, as far as the whole Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as far as denial being probably the strongest.
And the longest lasting,
Yeah.
because you live your entire life without thinking about it at all, without thinking that you're going to die, without even kind of just, I'm not going to die. You
And
know?
even when confronted with it, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You keep denying.
Yeah, nobody believes that they're going to die.
Yeah.
And so when they are confronted with it, and when they do see a dead person, it's suddenly like everyone's worst fear, which is totally valid. Like, it can't be everyone's worst fear to die. That is not a thing that people want to do. Nobody wants to, like, be like, oh, my life's over. I'm dead. But with the 5 stages, the most important part is accepting it. And that's kind of what I really like to focus on, is just accepting it, and more importantly, making plans for what what you want, and where you want to go, and what you want to have done with your body, and who's going to take care of it. Because I recently learned, interesting fact, power of attorney stops at death.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all transferred over to something about an estate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've, as far as the reading I've done, next of kin is a very large part of, what the legal process is after
Yeah.
death. So you can have your entire, I guess, forward planning erased if the person overseeing it disagrees.
Absolutely. That's a big thing in like trans communities, where your next of kin might be your mom, who doesn't think you're a girl, and you're a girl. And then you die, and they put you in a suit, and it's really, really tragic when that kind of stuff happens. So, like, next of kin isn't something that you want to just have, like, out there. Like, you want to make those plans, especially if you're, like, a marginalized person, and it's a possibility for you.
I know this is I don't know a better way to describe it, a battleground topic, but, there are a lot of different legal topics involving death at the moment, and that
Right.
includes disposal, as far as, like, what's medically acceptable or publicly acceptable.
Right.
And we can talk about that in a second, but is that one of those topics? Is it being addressed at all? As far as, like, having your power of attorney to extend beyond death? Or is that something where you just have to sort out with your estate will legally
Yes.
be bound to?
Yes.
Okay.
It's all in your pre-need.
Okay.
It's all going to be in just like your things that you've laid out for your plan. Like, if you pass and you don't trust your next of kin to take care of your wishes, you can have your like third cousin or your best friend
Okay.
or anyone. Yeah, as long as it's in there, because if it's not in there, then it's going to go to your next of kin, essentially.
Well, that's yeah. The legal landscape is of interest to me, and
Yeah.
yeah, the way I look at it is psychology and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and the social good. So when it comes to the death positive movement,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what are some legal landscapes that we're getting into now? As far as I know, you have an interest in green burial and other aspects of disposal.
I think my favorite one is conservation burial, which is kind of taking ground in the more blue states, I guess we should say.
And this is something that you would also, if legally acceptable, be able to write out ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
If you
so
had a burial ground, um, one of the places that I know of is in Joshua Tree in California, where it's a consecrated burial, not consecrated, that's a religious word, that was dumb. Um, it's a burial ground in a natural setting where you can go and you can be buried in a natural setting, and that land becomes more or less sacred. They can't develop on it. It's basically like a cemetery, but instead of having all those like
protected
yeah,
instead of consecrated.
there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Instead of having like the manicured lawns of a regular cemetery like we think of, it's just like trees and dirt and animals, and that's great. I love it, and that's one thing that I see getting fought for legally, and one thing that I really want to kind of fight for, because that's where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah, I know one thing. People always ask me when they find out what I'm going to school for, is they say, "Oh, that like that tree thing. You want to get buried and like it grows into a tree," and I have to explain to them that that's
Or the mushroom thing.
the mushroom thing is cool. The mushroom thing is your full body.
Okay, but go back to the tree. I'm sorry to interrupt.
The tree thing is you're cremated, which is burning your body, turning you into ashes, putting you in this biodegradable container that has tree seeds in it. So your body isn't necessarily turning into a tree. So the whole thing about conservation burial and natural burial, green burial, whatever, is that you could turn into a tree if you wanted, but you can also like your nitrogen in your body can like fuel the grass and like feed the animals, and it's just going back to the ground, and it's so freaking magical, and I love it. I'm
So-
sorry, I'm getting all like
No, but like the mushroom thing. So that's wearing the mushroom suit
yeah,
in your probably wicker burial casket.
yeah,
Okay.
good
So
stuff.
is that just a way to expedite your decomposition? Is that what that's for?
Yes.
Okay. So even there's ways to do a green burial that expedites it a little bit, I guess, greener.
Not greener, just a different way.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
because like depending on where you're buried, I mean, you can if you get buried in like wetlands, if you get buried in a desert, if you get buried in a forest with scavengers and more worms than less worms. It's all like it's all supernatural and super natural.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. That's one thing, and then the other thing is going into FEMA. I love the idea of making it about helping people in disasters by like finding their family members and giving them some sort of comfort, which I guess kind of ties back into the whole like death acceptance thing because
Well, yeah, because that does seem like a work around in, like careers and yeah, mortuary science that I don't know. Yeah, go on.
oh, just that when you're faced with something like that, when you're faced with death, and especially you're faced with disaster, death can be the both like the first thing and the last thing on your mind, and you just want your family back, you know, and that's the best part about going into something like this because you're able to it's not all about you and you dying and what's going to happen when you die. A lot of death acceptance and the psychology behind it is about the people that you're leaving behind.
Mm.
And the people that you're leaving behind have so much more to worry about than you,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. Like in disaster areas, there's so much that they have to figure out. Like they're homeless, it's a flood, it's a tornado, it's everyone's scattered everywhere. We can't find the pets and stuff like that. So the biggest thing about that is to just give the family, no matter what they're going through, some sort of comfort. And that's kind of the biggest thing about the funeral industry. Like, it's not really so much about you. Like, it's about all of your legal things. There's a ton of paperwork, but it's really more about your family. And that's like when we take the grief classes and we take the like culture of death and dying classes, we're mostly focusing on the families because that's who we're here for. And again, I said in the beginning that I'm not super stoked on what the funeral industry is about, but that's really more about the chemicals and the cost and everything else. It's not about the families.
Right.
I can't wait to work with people and hopefully make something a little easier, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the way
I dropped my notebook.
as far as the way psychology deals with death and dying on a therapeutic level, there's just a really heavy emphasis on I don't know, like aspects as far as the difference between grieving and bereavement and things like that. And one is supposed to be a natural process, and one's supposed to be somewhat like, I don't know if it would be pathological, but more or less it's like this is debilitating depression and things like that. And I think that's completely unfair because, and not to use any true crime podcast as an example, but it's just really that's where you see it famously, is that people don't react the same way when they're presented with the death of a loved one. And so any kind of skepticism about what is a natural or unnatural process is kind of completely bunk to begin with. And so, I mean, when we're dealing with concepts as far as mental health and death, and I know that's something that you've already started training in and will continue to, and it's part of your career. So you'll be far more of an expert than anyone that is sitting in a therapist chair. It's just going to be, I think, interesting having those conversations with people all the time and seeing just the myriad faces of what grief looks like, and people that are I don't know, handle it in different ways. And so and to bring it back around to the original topic, as far as like death acceptance,
There was one thing I did want to say.
I think that's part of it, is how different it looks. Please keep going.
Okay. There's a really cool book that I really like called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And it just deals with the fact that grief never goes away.
Yeah.
You never stop grieving, and you don't have to. And that's another thing about death acceptance, psychology, everything that we're talking about here, is that this culture, America, a lot of other places, I'd say Western cultures necessarily, maybe, there's some places where the dead live with them for years and years, and there's some places where they're tossed immediately to scavengers, and that's a big, like, beautiful ritual kind of thing. But for here, it's like, oh, your husband died like 6 months ago. What's your problem? And that's so unhealthy.
Oh, because we already did all the right things.
Exactly.
We gave them the embalming to preserve them perfectly as
Yeah.
if they never died, and we
Yeah.
put them in a casket where they never decompose,
Yeah. It's a big,
and
fancy, expensive casket. And
and then we put a memorial where
yeah.
you can see them all the time,
Right.
and
Yep.
so that's a lot different than different cultures where there might be a no marker,
Mm-hmm.
full cremation, or unmarked graves
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing about America's death care system is that it really is, like you said, it's just for show. And once we've done all of the things and you walk away from the grave, you should just be chill and just be over it.
You
And
have no excuse to
yeah,
be in mourning, and if there is, then maybe you need to talk to someone.
maybe you need to talk to someone.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where the psychology of it all, and you just get into this whole like
And I'll look straight into the camera and say, yeah, as a doctoral student in psychology, that's bullshit. And yeah, you don't need to. Yeah, healthy or grieving is healthy. You're certainly encouraged to talk to someone if you need to, but there's absolutely, yeah, there's you can work that out within your own means, whether or not, yeah, you feel like you're really experiencing something that needs professional help. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with grief.
there's nothing you can do about it. If you're grieving, just just grieve.
Yeah.
Just grieve. And you might be expected in this culture to, pick your shit up and move on with it, but there's no reason to. Yeah.
And also we're at a part or a point now in the conversation where, yeah, absolutely, there are people available to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no need to bootstraps it up either way.
Right.
Yeah, so
not at all.
yeah, it's just we are in such a weird spot in death in America, especially with an aging population, which
Yeah.
we do have. Where yeah, we definitely need to have these conversations more often. We do need changes in our death care system.
We do. We need changes in our end of life system, and we need changes in our death care system as far as cost, availability, transparency. There was a law passed recently that said that you, like, I don't remember if it was like in a state or something. I just read about it where funeral homes were like required to list exact prices because apparently that wasn't a thing, which is weird because like you need to know because the economy is on fire. So if you're burying someone and it's kind of a quick thing, it can get a little predatory out there. I'm not gonna lie.
And we're at the point now where we'll be wrapping it up in the next, I don't know, 8 minutes or so.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but I can at least say that it's interesting coming from someone from a profession that is often viewed as maybe frivolous or predatory, talking to someone else coming from a profession that is. Would you say that mortuary science has a bad reputation?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so does psychology, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, people think we're quacks.
They think you're quacks, and they think that we're creepy.
Yeah.
We're creepy people who don't
That
take
mark
care
up
of
prices,
things.
and they think that we charge $400 an hour for talk therapy on why your mom died.
Yeah.
And it's pretty bad
Mm-hmm.
as far as, but what you're getting here in this video is two people that reject that, and we're not.
Yeah.
I guess we are the future, and
Sounds so silly. Oh,
I know.
I love it. I love it. No,
Yeah.
I think that that's why we went into what we're going into because I know from talking to you that you want to keep marginalized people out of jail and you want to like work from the inside of your system and kind of improve things if you can, but you're also totally a stats guy. I love that.
it's liberal bullshit.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I think having progressive values inside of any industry is the best that we can do as a culture.
You have to work inside the system.
Well,
I can't just go around being a freelance natural burialist.
no,
That's a little creepy.
Yeah, you might run into some trouble as far as that, and I can't give clinical assessments and treatment without a license, or
Right.
yeah, or I'll be doing the same in jail.
Exactly.
So this is why degrees exist, and this is why the field of mortuary science exists. Especially that deep exhale was just, you're in a very difficult spot, because not only are you trying to create kind of an environment and conversations about death, but you're trying to deal with the actual chemistry of, the actual work of. What is the proper terminology? Is it a human part disposal? What do you all call funeral disposal of body parts nowadays? That wasn't an I gotcha. I'm sure there's different ways to phrase it.
Yeah, there's a lot of words for it.
Yeah, but instead of using like this hodgepodge of chemicals that gives the person doing the process cancer, which is well known, that's not
Yes, embalming fluid is toxic. Yep.
Okay. So.
Embalmers have a higher percentage of leukemia, oddly enough, and throat cancer, because it's a liquid. So when you breathe it in, you get throat cancer.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why we don't like embalming.
Okay.
I don't like embalming. I don't like embalming. I don't like cremation. I don't like a lot of it. I like the paperwork involved. I think that's cool. I really want to represent people who need it. And I just want to bury people in the ground and take care of their families.
So part of death acceptance is having just a healthier relationship with each other and the environment too.
Absolutely.
Where we don't need to preserve people for maybe psychological reasons.
Yeah. Because especially when they learn that sealed caskets are a nightmare, and all they do is trap the... I'm going to get real gross. I'm sorry. No, we're not going to get gross.
Well, you can explain a process without getting graphic, so...
They trap all of your fluids in the casket that's airtight until they create gases that explode the casket underground, which is good stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, so when you pay for that extra $500 rubber gasket on a casket,
that's just creating pressure.
That's what's happening to your loved one.
And that's chemistry.
And that's death acceptance. Like, just understand that we're all going to die, and we're going to return to the same organic matter, and it's okay. Because you can't do anything about it. That's the 5 stages. There's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, and then you have to go. You have to go. Everyone has to go. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die.
Well, that's a true statement.
That's a true statement.
You can prove us wrong when you don't.
There you go. Yeah, let us know in the comments.
But yeah, this was perfectly front to back conversations.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good.
So we're good.
Not good at this YouTube thing.
Yeah, well, I know. Yeah, we can invite you back.
Okay.
I'm sure if anyone would like more questions or comments from a mortician student, we can wrap that into conversations with a psychology student. So
I think they kind of work really well together, honestly.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
And I mean, how little did we scratch the surface? And
oh, exactly.
Yeah, we worked with breadth instead of depth, and at the same time,
hours
not just on a single topic.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, thanks for spending your time with me and us. And yeah, I'd love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, no problem. This was great. Talk more about it anytime. Literally all the time, forever.
Spooky.